I have always loved hiking. There's something about being in nature away from the noise of the city that makes me feel alive. One crisp autumn morning, I decided to take on a new trail in the mountains. Little did I know, that decision would lead to the most terrifying experience of my life. The day started out beautifully. The sun was shining, and the air was fresh. I packed my backpack with the essentials: water, snacks, a map, and my phone. As I walked, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The trees were tall and majestic, and the sound of birds singing filled the air. Everything was perfect until I misstepped on a loose rock. Before I knew it, I was tumbling down a steep ravine. I crashed through branches and bushes, finally coming to a stop with my leg wedged painfully between two rocks. I screamed out in agony as I realized I couldn't free myself. My leg was stuck, and the pain was unbearable. Hours passed, and my shouts for help went unanswered. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting eerie shadows through the forest. Fear began to set in as night fell. The temperature dropped, and I shivered in my thin jacket. I continued to call out, hoping against hope that someone would hear me. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I heard footsteps. A beam of light cut through the darkness, and a man appeared. He looked to be in his late 40s, with a rugged face and kind eyes. Relief flooded over me.
Are you okay?
He asked, his voice steady and calm.
My leg's stuck.
I managed to say through gritted teeth.
I think it's broken.
He knelt beside me and examined my leg.
This is gonna hurt, but I need to free your leg. Can you handle it?
I nodded, bracing myself. With a grunt, he managed to pry the rocks apart just enough for me to pull my leg free. The pain was excruciating, but I was too relieved to care.
Thank you.
I gasped.
Can you help me get to a hospital?
Of course.
He said.
I'm parked nearby. Let's get you out of here.
He helped me to my feet, and I leaned on him heavily as we made our way to his car. Each step was torture, but I kept going, driven by the need to get to safety. Finally, we reached his vehicle, an old pickup truck. He helped me into the passenger seat and then got behind the wheel.
So, where do you live?
He asked.
Just take me to the hospital, or call 911.
I replied, my voice shaky.
I'll take you to the hospital.
He assured me.
Just try to get some rest.
Exhausted, I closed my eyes, trusting that I was finally safe. I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, the truck had stopped. But we weren't at the hospital. We were in front of a house in the middle of nowhere. Panic surged through me.
Where are we at?
I demanded, my spirit in shambles. The man turned to me, his face eerily calm.
Relax.
He said, pulling out a large blade and pressing it to my throat.
Be silent and be still. Don't try to escape. You won't get far with that leg.
My mind raced as he got out of the truck and came around to my side. Just as he was about to open my door, we both heard voices. 3 men were coming out of the house carrying expensive-looking items.
Hey,
The man shouted. His attention suddenly focused on the prowlers.
what do you think you're doing?
The 3 burglars froze for a second, clearly startled. One of them dropped a flat-screen TV onto the ground with a loud crash, but they didn't flee right away. I could sense the tension building between the man and the burglars. My pulse pounded in my ears as I tried to come up with a plan. Could I escape while they were distracted? The blade had fallen out of his hand, landing just a few feet from me on the passenger seat. My leg screamed in pain at the thought of moving, but I didn't have a choice. The man took a few aggressive steps toward the burglars, raising his voice as his temper flared.
Oh boy, did you pick the wrong house.
But then one of the burglars, taller and broader than the others, pulled a gun from his waistband.
Back off, old man.
He growled, pointing the gun directly at him. For a second, I thought the man might back down, but then he lunged forward, his face twisted with fury. He reached into his jacket, probably going for another weapon, but before he could make his move, the loud crack of gunfire filled the air. The man staggered, his chest blooming with red, and he collapsed to the ground with a sickening thud. I sat frozen in the truck, my mind caged with fear. He wasn't moving. The burglars, spooked by what they had done, took off running into the night, leaving me alone with a dying man and a broken leg. For a moment I sat there, stunned. The blade was still on the seat next to me, but I was too terrified to move. What if the burglars came back? What if the man wasn't dead and decided to finish what he started? But as the minutes ticked by, he didn't stir. Blood pooled beneath him, staining the dirt. I forced myself to act. Gritting my teeth against the pain, I crawled out of the truck and dragged myself over to the man. Up close, I could see that he was definitely dead. His eyes were glassy and his chest wasn't rising. I fumbled for my own phone in my pocket, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. It felt like hours before I heard the sound of sirens in the distance. The police and paramedics arrived, and as they loaded me into the ambulance, I told them everything that had happened. The paramedics tried to comfort me, but I couldn't shake the trauma that still hung over me. A few days later, as I was recovering in the hospital, I received a phone call. It was the district victim's advocate. She informed me that the man who had helped me was actually a serial killer the police had been searching for. He lured people in by pretending to be a good Samaritan, only to take them to his house where he would... Well, you can imagine the rest. I didn't want to hear any more details. I was just grateful to be alive. I'll never forget that night. The terror, the blood, and the lesson I learned. Sometimes the greatest danger doesn't come from the wilderness. It comes from the people you trust to save you. The sky was already darkening when I started my usual hike. The trail was familiar and my boots crunched softly on the leaves scattered all around. I loved this time of day, the cool air, the peacefulness, and the way it helped me clear my mind. But that evening felt different than the previous one. The air smelled like rain, and I could feel a slight chill creeping in. I had only planned a short walk, something I'd done 1,000 times before. But when the first drops of rain began to fall, I realized I had walked further than I meant to. I looked around, suddenly noticing a fork in the trail. I didn't remember seeing that. For a moment I stood there, staring at the two paths. The one on the left looked more worn, so I chose it, hoping it would lead me back to the main trail. As I walked, the rain started to pour harder. It wasn't a light drizzle anymore. It was heavy, cold rain, and within minutes, I was soaked through. The path kept twisting and turning, leading me deeper into the woods. The trees grew closer together, making the trail hard to see. I began to wonder if I had made the wrong choice. Suddenly, it appeared. A house, barely visible through the trees. It looked old, abandoned even. Its windows were dark and its roof sagged. But in that moment, it was the only shelter around. The rain was falling in sheets and I was freezing. I hesitated, but I didn't have much of a choice. I needed to get out of the storm. I ran towards the house, my boots slipping in the mud. The porch creaked as I stepped onto it, and I quickly ducked under the overhang, hoping it would at least keep me dry for a while. The rain pounded on the tin roof and the wind howled through the trees. I pulled out my phone, hoping to pass the time. Sitting there on the porch, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The house seemed to breathe with the wind, the old boards groaning like they were alive. I tried to distract myself by scrolling through social media, but the cold and the strange noises made it hard to focus. After what felt like forever, the storm showed no signs of stopping. The rain only got heavier, and the wind picked up, making the trees sway dangerously. I shivered and glanced at the front door. It had been closed when I arrived, but now it was slightly open. I froze, staring at the door. Had it been opened before? No, I was sure it hadn't been. My mind started racing. I stood up, stepping back toward the porch railing, my breath coming in short, quick bursts. That's when I saw it, something in the window. It was faint, but I could see eyes, red and bloodshot, staring at me from inside the house. I gasped, backing away as fast as I could without falling over the porch railing. The rain was loud. The wind was howling, but all I could hear was the pounding of my own heartbeat. I blinked, and the eyes were gone. But the door, it creaked open wider, as if someone, or something, was inviting me in. I felt a chill wash over me, making my hair stand on end. I was trapped. If I ran into the woods, I'd get lost. But staying near that house, with those eyes watching me, felt even more dangerous. The wind pushed against me, almost as if it were urging me toward the door. I made up my mind. I couldn't stay there. I took a deep breath and jumped off the porch, landing hard in the mud. I started running, not caring which direction I went as long as it was away from that house. The branches tore at my clothes and rain blurred my vision, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Behind me, I could hear something. Footsteps, maybe. Or was it just the sound of the storm? My heart was racing and my legs and lungs burned from running, but the fear kept me going. I glanced over my shoulder, hoping to see nothing but darkness. But there was something there. I couldn't make it out clearly through the rain, but I knew it was watching me, following me. Those eyes. They were closer now. I ran harder, pushing through the pain in my legs and the cold that had seeped into my bones. The trail felt endless, and the trees seemed to close in around me. Every shadow looked like a figure waiting to reach out and grab me. Just when I thought I couldn't run any farther, the trees began to thin. Up ahead, I could see the main path. Relief washed over me. I was almost there. I just had to keep going a little longer. But as I reached the clearing, something tripped me. I fell hard, the impact knocking the wind out of me. I lay there for a moment, gasping for breath, too afraid to move. I listened, waiting to hear footsteps or see those eyes again. But all I heard was the rain, now lighter, and the wind, now softer. I forced myself to stand up, my whole body trembling. I glanced back, but there was nothing behind me. No house, no eyes, nothing but the dark, wet woods. I stumbled forward, my legs weak, until I reached the parking lot. My car was there, waiting like a safe haven. I climbed inside and slammed the door, locking it behind me. My hands were shaking as I started the engine. The heater blasted warm air at me, but I still felt cold, like the chill from the house had settled deep inside me. When I turned on my headlights, a figure in a mask and a dark hooded robe was standing directly in front of my car, with those bloodshot eyes. Without even thinking, I floored the pedal, sending him flying over my car. I kept going without looking back. As I drove home, I couldn't stop thinking about those eyes. That man. Was he going to kill me? I think so. I told myself it didn't matter. I was safe now. But a part of me knew I would never feel completely safe again. Later, when I tried to tell people what happened, no one believed me. They said there was no house in those woods, that I had probably just gotten turned around in the storm. The police even went out to look, but they found nothing. It was like the house or that robed man had never existed. But I know what I saw. I know what I had done. I know those eyes were real. And sometimes late at night, when I close my eyes, I see them again, watching me, waiting for me.
Ha 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 ha.